Hello and welcome to Q&A Tuesday on the 28th of April, and I hope you're all well and thriving out there. I'm so grateful that I am. Today I have a question, or rather a set of problems that someone has written to me about regarding the changes she's making in her diet that I think are really common for many people when they make the type of changes that I teach in this program and really in all my work. And in short, this young lady is finding that her friends and especially her family are not very supportive in regard to her changes in diet. Probably more specifically in regard to eliminating meat, eggs and dairy, but also to a lesser extent in regard to eliminating sugar and processed foods as well. And this is really typical. People are significantly more threatened by our decision not to eat animals than they are by our decision not to eat sugar, because there's an ethical side to eating other sentient beings that just isn't there for sugar. And she's had some reactions to her recent choices that A, question the nutritional adequacy of her diet, and B, where people have taken her choices personally. So I'd like to take some time to explore a bit more about this issue today, both in terms of understanding these reactions and in terms of how to deal with them. Now, many a vegan has been on the receiving end of jokes, jibes, digs, insensitive quips and cruel comments. And though it can be hard not to take it personally, the truth is that all these insensitive reactions have nothing to do with you. They reflect resistance on the part of the non-vegan to take an honest and thoughtful look in the mirror that you're holding up for them. Now, in regards to scenario A, be prepared for everyone around you to start sounding like a nutritionist when they find out that you're vegan. And I'm always fascinated by this phenomenon. Nobody says anything to anybody about the health dangers linked to eating meat, dairy, eggs, or sugar and processed foods, and the nutrient deficiencies common with this way of eating. But as soon as they find out that you've stopped eating these foods, everybody's an expert. You know, oh my gosh, you're vegan? Where do you get your protein? And by now, you should know the answer to that one. If you don't, go back to the Meet Your Meat nutrition lesson, the mindset lesson on a question of ethics, and to my YouTube video series on protein. And I really encourage people to speak the truth and express concern for their friends and family. You could say something like, oh my gosh, you eat meat, eggs, dairy and sugar? Don't you know they're linked to heart disease and diabetes and stroke and cancer? And where do you get your fibre and vitamin C, vitamin E, folate and antioxidants? So just give that a try. And I can tell you right now that most of them won't know. But those are actually the true deficiencies in people's diets, and also that a majority of our diseases nowadays are diseases of excess, not diseases of deficiency. And once they start seeing how much healthier you are and seeing you lose weight and thrive, those concerns will disappear. And I think I do actually give some suggestions for dealing with these also in must be one of the lifestyle lessons, probably the one on your social life. But when we're dealing with people reacting to the ethical side of veganism, that's a much more complex issue. As a positive lifestyle as this is, one of the unfortunate components of veganism is that your choice to be vegan may evoke defensiveness in people around you, and I've seen this happen time and time again. And I think it really throws people. I don't think people expect to encounter hostility or unpleasant comments about their own personal choice. And it's really helpful to understand why this happens. And I have a few theories on this that I'll go through, but basically I think that when we hold up our truth, we are a mirror for other people, and if it reflects back something in them that they're not comfortable with because they haven't explored it, or they feel like they know they should do something about it and they're not, it becomes a threat to people. And so they become defensive and they might be angry, and you need to be prepared for that, because I don't think a lot of people do expect it. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the people reacting in this way are good people, kind people, and they probably already hold the same values you do about animals, the environment, and even their health. And that's part of the problem. The truth that animals have to suffer and die because of them, or that they are contributing to global warming, is really just too painful for most people to acknowledge. And while there are many reasons for people's unpleasant reactions, most important is the invisible belief system or ideology called carnism. And if you haven't heard that term before, I'm just going to spend a bit of time exploring what this actually is. Carnism conditions people to eat animals by numbing them psychologically and emotionally to the truth of their experience, by blocking their awareness of the discrepancy between their values and their practices. So whenever a group of people make an exception to what they would normally consider ethical, and especially when they are unaware of such an exception, it shows that some kind of underlying ideology is at work. Now, ideologies such as carnism, which require people to act against their core values, use a set of social and psychological defense mechanisms so that humane people participate in inhumane practices without realizing what they're doing. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, my cat is creating a din. She wants to go out. So I'm going to let her out and I'll be right back. And in the usual way of cats, she really took her time with that one. So we're talking about carnism, and so getting people, the humane people, to participate in inhumane practices. And the primary defense of carnism is invisibility. The invisibility of carnism as an ideology is why eating animals is seen as a given rather than a choice. And the invisibility of the practices of carnism, so the breeding and slaughtering of animals for food, is why people are able to deny and avoid the horrific truths about animal agriculture. But due in large part to the advent of the internet and the success of a lot of vegan activists worldwide, invisibility, while it's still a powerful defense, has been kind of weakened, so that other defenses have taken on a more important role in maintaining the system. And understanding these secondary defenses is really important to transforming the system that enables even people who are animal lovers to actually be animal eaters. And exploitation or exploitative systems such as carnism teach people to justify their actions by presenting ideological myths as though they were universal truths. And there is a huge mythology surrounding eating animals, but all myths fall in one way or another under the 3 N's of justification. And we went through this a wee bit in the A Question of Ethics presentation, and that is that eating animals is normal, natural, and necessary. And not surprisingly, these same arguments have been used to support ideologies that have enabled slavery, male dominance, heterosexual supremacy, and all sorts of other ideologies. And these kind of myths are institutionalized. They are embraced and maintained by all major social institutions in our community, from the family to the state, and they are really deeply embedded in the consciousness of anyone born into a carnistic culture like New Zealand. And the impact of the 3 N's on meat eaters can't really be underestimated. If people truly believe in the N's, which most do, then by default they perceive not eating animals as abnormal, unnatural, and unnecessary. And so you becoming vegan feels threatening and also needless to them. Deviating from the norm also means eating in an unnatural way, and thus an unhealthful diet, because natural is considered to be synonymous with healthful, which is such a huge irony given the health benefits of a whole food vegan diet. And if veganism is seen as abnormal and unnatural, then it's pointless to consider making the change, or they consider that it's pointless for you to have made this change. And carnism uses another set of defences which support and are supported by the 3 N's, and that is cognitive distortions or cognitive dissonance. And these distortions are the psychological component of carnism. They're automatic, unconscious mental processes that distort our perceptions of meat and the animals that we learn to eat, so that we can feel comfortable enough to consume them. So in short, when we're born into this entrenched system, we learn to look at the world through the lens of that system. We internalize carnism. And cognitive distortions cause people to, for instance, view farm animals as objects. So, for example, people will refer to a chicken as something rather than someone. And it also teaches us, or causes people to view farm animals as abstractions, lacking any individuality or personality. So, for example, that a pig is a pig and all pigs are the same. And these distortions also cause people to create rigid categories in their minds, so that they can harbour very different feelings and behaviours toward different species. So, for example, beef is seen as delicious and dog meat is disgusting. Cows are for eating and dogs are our friends. And essentially, cognitive distortions act as a distancing mechanism. They distance people from their natural empathy toward other sentient beings. And the vast majority of people, including animal lovers, eat animals not because they're selfish or evil, but because they're part of a system that has shaped their beliefs, their preferences, their thoughts, feelings, and their behaviours in some really profound and powerful ways. And because most people do care about animals, they feel threatened by and therefore defend against information that reveals any discrepancy between their values and their practices. In fact, animal lovers are likely to be even more defended against learning how they've participated in atrocities against animals, because they're so much more sensitive to the animal suffering, and they can't bear to think that they've actually caused it. And so once we understand carnism, hopefully we can recognize that eating animals is not simply a matter of personal ethics. it's really the inevitable end result of a deeply entrenched belief system. And so hopefully then we can reframe the way that we think and talk about our decision to not eat animals. So specifically, understanding carnism can help vegans to have more understanding and so more compassion for those who are not vegan. It can also help you to communicate more effectively about veganism, because hopefully then we understand the psychology of those that we're communicating with more, and then we can avoid the frustration that comes with the expectation that I think a lot of especially new vegans have, that the facts will sell veganism. They don't. And it helps to expect some defensiveness when discussing eating animals. But perhaps most importantly, understanding carnism can help us appreciate that telling someone who's close to us that about our decision not to eat animals anymore, even someone who loves animals, can seem like a criticism of them and their decision to continue eating meat. And it very well might be, when you really look at it. Them understanding your decision and perhaps even joining you in this decision does not simply entail a change of behavior. It really entails this profound shift of consciousness, and this shift will only occur when the individual is ready. And as vegans, our job is to help create a state of readiness by modeling the same understanding and compassion that we're asking for. And one of the most important things that we need to do is to remember our story, where we came from, because I'm assuming that most of you probably weren't born vegan, and you would have eaten meat, eggs and dairy at some point, and perhaps were unaware or blocked or resistant to ideas about veganism. When thinking specifically how to deal with their defensiveness or their comments, their anger, their questions, I think that more important than what you say or do is actually listening to them, the meat eaters, because meat eaters are actually struggling with something that you have resolved. Your being vegan obviously distresses them, but they probably don't understand why. They actually have a need to hear and acknowledge you, as well as a need not to hear you and to deny your choices. And if they were ready to hear you and accept your decision not to eat meat, eggs and dairy, they would also have to acknowledge that veganism is an acceptable choice, i.e. not normal, natural or necessary, and they would then have to recognize their ability to change. And they would have to recognize that something was keeping them from making that decision to change. And until they understand why they resist your decision, their interaction with you is probably going to be fraught with implicit and explicit attacks against you. So they're struggling to hear what you're actually saying. But on the other hand, you have no reason not to hear them. If they argue on behalf of meat eating, well, you've certainly heard that before. In fact, you may have said those same things before yourself. You may have thought those things. We can't always help people to hear us and accept our decision, but in listening to them, we can show them how to listen, and we can hear their story. And in this respect, questions are always so much more powerful than facts or what you have to say or your story. And one example that I come across all the time is when a meat eater asks me if they're eating meat in front of me grosses me out. And this question from them actually reveals that they have some consciousness that a piece of meat can look disgusting to someone. They haven't internalized this feeling yet, but they kind of intuit that it exists. So how do you respond to this? Should you tell them, yes, you are grossing me out? But I think kind of in a sense they already know this, and that it might help them to make the connection more for you to respond by saying something like, the question is, when you look at this meat, what do you see? Not what do I see? And what do you do with the knowledge that you're eating dead animals? So we need to get out of the meat eater's process, not to be a target of their feelings. And you can listen to clues that people give you about themselves. If they say that they just can't handle any more changes in their home or their family, then we need to be able to hear them and ask them about what they're going through. Even find ways to help people connect with their natural empathy. Ask them about their pets or pets that they had as children. And if someone takes your choices personally, we could ask them, why do you feel this is about you? One thing I really recommend though is never have these conversations when people are eating meat. Too much is at stake, pardon the pun, for there to be any real meaningful conversation at that point. And also remember that you're not obliged to have any conversation you don't want to. If people are not asking genuine questions, or you can sense their defensiveness, that they're not ready to hear what you have to say, stop the conversation. You do not have to answer people's questions or respond to challenges. Sometimes our responses to these questions or challenges actually goes further to create their identity as being a meat eater, and this creates a sense of separateness. So we have to find ways to help others to acknowledge our commonalities, not our differences, and the ways that they can identify with us rather than enact hostilities towards us. So if need be, stop the conversation, change the topic of the conversation. You may have to be direct and say, I really don't want to talk about this now, or now really isn't an appropriate time for this conversation. And then you could offer, if you're genuinely interested in having a dialogue about the issues, maybe we could meet up at another time. Anyway, that's my A to your Q, and I know it was quite a general answer. And if there is a really specific situation that you're having problems with, I'd also be really happy to provide my perspective on that. So that's all for today. I hope it's been helpful for many of you, and I look forward to getting other questions from you. And until next time, have a great week.